My daughter looked the nurse in the eye and lied. She said I was too confused to decide where I would live. I thought she was helping me recover. Instead, she was quietly erasing me from my own home. Then Nurse Alvarez saw my initials on a placement form, dated 4 days before my fall. Who gave her permission to sign away my life? My name is Connie Bauer. I was 69 years old, and the home my daughter wanted to take me from was the same little brick house where I had raised her for 32 years. I was not perfectly well. That is important. I had missed medication. I had hidden 2 dizzy spells. I had been pretending that a quiet house meant a safe house. Brianna had a reason to worry about me. She did not have the right to turn her worry into an eviction. The form was still lying on the bedrail when Nurse Alvarez came into my hospital room on Wednesday morning. It was a crisp white document with a gray facility logo in the upper corner. Oak Ridge Assisted Living and Memory Care. My name appeared near the top in bold black type. Underneath were the words, Application for Temporary Residential Placement. Brianna was standing beside the window with her arms folded tightly across her navy sweater. Her knuckles were white. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be," she said, her voice pitched in that smooth, practiced calm she used on difficult clients at her office. "We talked about this. It's only for 30 days. I looked at the paper on the metal rail. We didn't talk about Oak Ridge, Brianna. And I'm asking who put my initials on this line." Brianna's mouth tightened into a thin defensive seam. "You initialed it at home. On Tuesday, before the ambulance came." The room went completely still. I remembered Tuesday. I remembered the cold ceramic tile against my cheek. I remembered staring at the bottom edge of the refrigerator for 11 minutes, unable to lift my right arm, praying the landline cord would stretch across the kitchen floor. I remembered the paramedics lifting me onto the gurney. I did not remember signing a single sheet of paper. Nurse Alvarez stopped adjusting the 4-drip. She pulled a rolling stool close to my bed, sat down and looked directly into my face. "Connie," she said quietly, ignoring Brianna, "I need to hear your answer from you. Where do you want to be discharged to tomorrow morning?" Brianna stepped forward immediately, placing herself between the nurse's chair and my bed. "Nurse Alvarez, my mother gets disoriented when her blood pressure drops. She says she wants to go home, but she lives alone. She cannot safely manage her stairs or her medications. The transport van is already scheduled for 2 o'clock. A cold shock went straight through my chest. "The transport van is already scheduled." "I am right here," I said. My voice shook, and I hated how small it sounded against the hum of the heart monitor. Brianna turned toward me with a patient, pitying expression that made my stomach turn. "That is exactly what I mean, Mom. You're upset. You're confused." Nurse Alvarez did not look at Brianna. Her eyes stayed locked on mine. "Connie, where do you want to go?" I pushed myself upright against the pillows. The hospital gown felt paper-thin against my back, but I refused to sink into the mattress. "I want to go home with help." Brianna let out a sharp, exasperated breath. "You cannot live alone in that house." "I did not say I wanted to live without help, Brianna," I said, looking straight at her. "I said I want help in my own home." For 5 seconds, the only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. Then Nurse Alvarez reached over, picked up the white form from the bedrail, and held it under the overhead fluorescent light. "Connie," the nurse said, pointing her pen at the small checkbox under Section 4. "Are these your initials?" I leaned forward. There they were. 2 neat, rounded capital letters written in black ballpoint ink. CB. I recognized the loop of the C. I recognized the slight slant of the B. They were my initials. But the pen stroke was stiff. It lacked the natural fluid sweep of my hand. It looked like someone had traced the letters with deliberate, careful pressure. "I recognize the shape of the letters," I said, every word clear. "I do not recognize the decision." Nurse Alvarez turned to Brianna. "Brianna, who completed Section 4? "My mother did," Brianna said quickly. "With my assistance." "That is not what I asked. Who put the pen to the paper?" Brianna looked down at the linoleum floor. Her jaw worked, but she said nothing. In that quiet moment, the entire room shifted. It was not a victory. It was only the first moment someone stopped treating my daughter's certainty as fact, and stopped treating my frailty as an erasure. Nurse Alvarez turned the document over. At the top of the authorization block was a computer-printed date. March 14th. March 14th was 4 days before my fall. 4 days before the ambulance. 4 days before I lay on the kitchen floor. I looked at Brianna. "When did you decide I was leaving my house, Brianna?" Brianna didn't answer. She grabbed her leather bag and walked out into the corridor. I wish I could say that I had been completely honest with my daughter before that morning. I had not. For nearly 2 months, I had been making small, frightening mistakes. Nothing catastrophic at first. I took my morning blood pressure tablet at lunch. I forgot whether I had filled the Thursday compartment in my 7-day pill box. Once I found an unopened blister pack of heart medication inside a pocket of my winter coat, and I had no memory of putting it there. I began writing every dose on a wall calendar beside the refrigerator in dark blue ink. I stopped letting Brianna see the calendar. She had developed a habit of walking into my kitchen, scanning the counters and asking questions that sounded like an audit. "Did you take the white pill? Did you lock the porch door? Why is the burner knob turned to medium? Have you eaten since breakfast?" I answered yes to every question because yes ended the interrogation faster than I'm not sure. 2 weeks before the hospital, I slipped near the laundry baskets in the basement. I bruised my left hip against the washing machine. I stayed on the concrete floor for 6 minutes, catching my breath, before pulling myself up by the utility sink. When Brianna noticed me limping that evening, I told her I had stubbed my toe on the coffee table. Then came Tuesday morning. I was reaching for a box of oatmeal in the upper cupboard. My knees simply folded. There was no pain, no warning, just a sudden terrifying emptiness in my legs. I hit the tile floor, knocking over my mug. The coffee spread across the floor, soaking into the sleeve of my cardigan. I sat there for 11 minutes. The phone hung on the wall 4 feet above me. Every time I tried to reach up, my shoulder burned with sharp pain. When I finally dragged myself to the wall and pulled the cord down, I called 911 first. Then I called Brianna. That silence, those weeks of hiding my weakness, had been my mistake. My pride had created the vacuum. My fear of becoming a burden had given Brianna a real legitimate reason to be terrified. She had driven 45 miles in heavy rain to reach the emergency room. She had sat in a plastic chair beside my bed for 12 straight hours while the doctors ran scans. She had taken my soiled clothes home, washed them, folded them, and brought them back in a clean tote bag. She was not an evil daughter. She was an exhausted, panicked daughter who had decided that because I had hidden my danger, I no longer deserved a say in my survival. Those two realities had to live in the same room. At 10 o'clock, Nurse Alvarez returned with a woman in a charcoal blazer and wire-rimmed glasses. "Connie," Nurse Alvarez said. "This is Ms. Patel, the hospital's patient advocacy social worker." Ms. Patel sat in the chair beside my bed and opened a manila case file. "Mrs. Bauer," Nurse Alvarez flagged an irregularity on the Oak Ridge intake document. "Before any discharge plan can proceed, hospital regulations require me to confirm voluntary patient consent. Did you authorize this placement?" "No," I said. "Did you authorize your daughter to act as your general healthcare proxy or legal power of attorney?" "I never signed a power of attorney," I said. "I signed a single permission slip last November so Brianna could pick up my heart prescription when my car battery died." Miss Patel nodded and made a note. On the bedrail beside my pillow, Brianna's black portfolio folder was still sitting where she had left it before walking into the hallway. I looked at Miss Patel. "May I see what is inside that folder?" Miss Patel hesitated, then reached over and handed it to me. "It was left in your room, Mrs. Bauer. If it contains documents concerning your care, you have every right to inspect them." I unzipped the black leather case. On top was the Oak Ridge application. Behind it was a copy of my Medicare card. Behind the Medicare card was a photocopy of the document I had signed on November 14th at the local pharmacy. Across the top of the pharmacy sheet in my own handwriting was written, "For prescription pickup and refill authorization only." The initials CB at the bottom of that November form were identical in size, angle, and curvature to the initials on the Oak Ridge intake application. Someone had photocopied the bottom corner of the pharmacy form, placed it onto the Oak Ridge template, and run it through a copy machine. In the right-hand margin of the folder's divider tab, written in Brianna's neat, slanted pencil script, was a single handwritten note. Use November pharmacy auth if she becomes difficult. Van deposit $250 non-refundable. Room 14B. I stared at that sentence until the pencil graphite blurred. If she becomes difficult. For 10 years, ever since my husband Thomas passed away, difficult had been Brianna's favorite word for whenever I said no. When I refused to sell Thomas's oak workbench to her husband's co-worker, she said I was being difficult. When I wanted to keep planting my tomato garden instead of paving the backyard, she told my sister I was being difficult. When I insisted on managing my own checking account, she sighed and told the bank teller that her mother was becoming difficult to manage. I had spent a decade translating difficult into ungrateful. I had swallowed my objections because I was terrified that if I pushed back, she would stop visiting. And now that word had been written down as a strategy to remove me from my home. Miss Patel took the photocopy from my hands. Her face hardened. She picked up her desk phone and dialed the number printed on the Oak Ridge letterhead. She put the call on speaker. Oak Ridge Admissions, this is Brenda speaking. Good morning, Brenda. This is Ms. Patel, Senior Discharge Planner at County Memorial Hospital. I am reviewing an intake packet for Connie Bauer, Room 14B. I need to verify the reservation timeline on this account. There was a sound of typing over the line. Yes, Ms. Patel. We have Mrs. Bauer listed for intake today at 2:30 p.m. The reservation was initiated by her daughter, Brianna Bauer, on Tuesday, March 14th. The $250 room hold deposit was paid by Visa that same afternoon. Ms. Patel looked at me, then at the calendar on her tablet. Thank you, Brenda. Was there an assessment conducted prior to that deposit? No, the daughter indicated that the mother had severe memory impairment and that family authorization was complete. Thank you. Please put a temporary administrative hold on this intake. The patient has not consented. Ms. Patel hung up the phone. The room was suffocatingly quiet. Tuesday, March 14th. 3 full days before I fell in the kitchen. While I had been standing at my stove making vegetable soup, while I had been watering the African violets on my windowsill, while I had been looking forward to Sunday dinner, my daughter had already paid money to lock away my furniture and put my name on room 14B. The door opened and Brianna walked back in, holding a paper cup of coffee. She saw the black folder open in Ms. Patel's lap. She saw my face. She stopped in the middle of the room. You called Oak Ridge on Tuesday, Brianna, I said. My voice was not loud. It was steady. It was the voice I had used for 31 years when a schoolchild had been caught breaking a rule and needed to hear the truth without cruelty. Brianna's eyes darted between me and the social worker. Mom, listen to me. You paid a deposit 3 days before I fell. Brianna set the coffee cup on the rolling tray with a sharp clatter. Because you were not safe, she cried, her voice cracking open, shedding the cold administrative tone. Do you know what it felt like to walk into your house last month and find the stove burner clicking on high with nothing on it? Do you know what it felt like to find your blood pressure pills scattered across the rug? You were going to die in that house, Mom. And if you died, everyone would look at me and ask why I didn't stop it. Tears streamed down her cheeks, smearing her mascara. I was drowning, she whispered, pressing her palms against her temples. I have 2 kids, a 40-hour job, and a mother who refuses to admit that she is 70 years old. If I asked you to move, you would have said no. You always say no. You treat every offer of help like an insult. Her words hit me like physical blows, because part of what she said was true. I had made independence into a fortress. I had treated every question about my health as an attack on my dignity. Whenever she offered to hire a cleaning person or set up a meal delivery, I had stiffened and said, I can take care of myself. I had forced her to carry her terror in silence. You were right to be afraid, Brianna, I said softly. Brianna looked up, startled by my response. You were right that I needed help, I continued. You were right that I hid my falls. But being frightened did not give you the right to forge my name and steal my home. I didn't forge it, she said defensively. I used the authorization we already had. To pick up heart medicine, Ms. Patel interrupted firmly. Not to surrender a human being's constitutional liberty. What you did, Ms. Bauer, is a fraudulent medical proxy submission. If this hospital proceeded with this transfer, we would be complicit in an unlawful placement. Brianna slumped into the plastic chair, burying her face in her hands. I need the original records from my house, I told Ms. Patel. I gave her the phone number from my neighbor Arthur Lewis. Mr. Lewis was 72, a retired machinist who lived across the street. He had kept an emergency key to my front door since 2014. 40 minutes later, Mr. Lewis arrived at the hospital room. He was carrying my blue expanding accordion folder under his arm. Here it is, Connie, he said, looking around the tense room with gentle concern. Your kitchen calendar is still hanging by the fridge, just like you asked. I unlatched the blue elastic band. Inside that folder was the paper history of my adult life. Thomas's pension papers, the deed to our brick home paid off in 2002, our homeowner's insurance policy, and the original yellowed carbon copy of the November 14th pharmacy authorization. Beside it was my kitchen wall calendar. Patel laid the original pharmacy document side by side with the Oak Ridge application. Under the bright light, the difference was unmistakable. The pharmacy authorization clearly stated in bold type, restricted TO pharmaceutical dispensary liaison only. Then Ms. Patel turned to the calendar page for March 18th, the morning of my fall. There, beside the printed number 18, written in blue ink with a shaky hand, were 4 words, fell. Call Brianna. Stop hiding. I had written those words on the counter while waiting for the ambulance. Ms. Patel read the entry aloud. This is the handwriting of a woman who was fully aware of her situation, aware of her vulnerability, and preparing to ask for family support, Ms. Patel said. She was not comatose, she was not demented, and she was not incompetent. Brianna stared at the calendar page. The room door creaked open again. Brianna's 16-year-old daughter, Chloe, stood in the doorway. She was wearing her high school track jacket, clutching the straps of her backpack. She looked between her weeping mother and me. Chloe, Brianna said, wiping her face quickly. I told you to wait in the cafeteria. Chloe stepped inside anyway. Her eyes were red. Grandma, Chloe said, her voice trembling but clear. Tell them what you told me on Sunday. Brianna turned sharply. Chloe, stay out of this. No, Mom, Chloe said, stepping right up to the side of my bed. Grandma told me on Sunday that she needed help with her medicine. She asked me if I would come over on Tuesdays and Thursdays after school to help her organize the pillbox. She said she was afraid you would put her in a home if she told you. Brianna looked at her daughter as if she had been slapped. Connie, you told Chloe that? Yes, I said. Because Chloe listened to me without holding a clipboard. Chloe looked at her mother. Grandma didn't want to be abandoned, Mom. She just wanted someone to help her without making her feel like she didn't exist anymore. Brianna let out a ragged sob and covered her mouth. The room fell into an unbroken silence. That was my moment of recognition. Not because my granddaughter had taken my side in a fight, but because she had named the Bedrail wound without hiding behind anger or administrative excuses. I was vulnerable. I had made mistakes. I could no longer live exactly as I had lived 10 years ago. But needing help did not mean I had ceased to be a person. Ms. Patel closed the manila folder. Here are the hospital's findings, she said with quiet authority. The residential placement transfer is formally cancelled. Mrs. Bauer has 2 legal discharge options. Option A. A 30-day voluntary respite stay at an assisted living facility of her choice. Option B. Discharge to her private residence with a certified home health care plan, including daily nurse visits, an automated electronic medication dispenser, and a mandatory home safety audit. Brianna looked up, her eyes desperate. What if she falls again? Then the home health nurse documents the incident, and we reassess the plan together, Ms. Patel said. With Mrs. Bauer at the table, not behind her back. Ms. Patel turned to me. Connie, what is your decision? For 10 seconds I felt the old fear claw at my throat. What if Brianna was right? What if I went home and slipped on the rug again? What if the automated dispenser jammed? The temptation to surrender, to let someone else carry the burden of my safety, was terrifyingly sweet. Surrender looks like peace when you are exhausted. Then I looked at the black folder on the bedrail. I looked at the margin note. If she becomes difficult. I took a deep breath. I am going home, I said. I will accept the daily nurse. I will install the handrails. I will let Brianna have access to the medication schedule. But I am sleeping in my own bed. I was discharged on Friday afternoon. Brianna drove me home. Neither of us turned on the car radio. The blue accordion folder sat squarely in my lap, with the voided Oak Ridge application tucked safely inside the front pocket. When we pulled into my gravel driveway, the little brick house looked smaller than I remembered, but the front porch light was on. We walked up the concrete steps together. As I reached into my coat pocket, Brianna turned and held out her open palm. "Give me your house keys, Mom," she said. "I'll keep them on my ring from now on." A week earlier I would have handed them over. I would have apologized for being a problem, walked inside, and locked the door behind my own surrender. Instead, I gripped the brass key ring tightly in my palm. "You can have a copy for emergencies, Brianna," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "The original stays with me." "Mom, be reasonable." "Brianna," I said, and my voice was completely calm. "You can help me carry the weight. You cannot use the weight to carry me away." Brianna looked down at my closed hand. Her shoulders dropped. For the first time in months, the tense, controlling posture melted out of her frame. "I don't know how to do this, Mom," she whispered. "I don't know how to worry about you without taking over." "Then we sit at the kitchen table and write down the rules," I said. "Together." We spent 2 hours at the kitchen table. We wrote down the terms on a clean sheet of notebook paper. Rule 1. Brianna could manage the home health nurse schedule, but she could not answer questions addressed directly to me. Rule 2. The pharmacy authorization remained strictly limited to medication pickup. Rule 3. If either of us felt frightened or overwhelmed, we had to say it aloud within 24 hours instead of building secret plans. Rule 4. No documents would ever be signed while either of us was angry or afraid. Brianna signed the bottom of the page. Then I signed beside her. For the next 4 weeks my life changed. A nurse named Sarah came every weekday morning at 8 o'clock to check my vitals and log my electronic pill dispenser. Mr. Lewis installed a sturdy oak handrail along my back steps. Chloe came over every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon to do her homework at my kitchen table and drink peppermint tea. Brianna still struggled. Once, during a doctor's appointment, the physician asked how my appetite had been. Brianna opened her mouth to answer for me. I laid my hand on her wrist. "Doctor," I said, "my appetite has been fine, but I've had trouble sleeping after 8 p.m. Brianna closed her mouth, looked down, and nodded. Another evening, she came over while I was preparing dinner. She stood at the sink, washing a coffee mug under warm running water. Without turning around, she spoke over the sound of the faucet. "I was so terrified of finding you dead, Mom," she said, her voice thick. "I made you safe from one danger, and I made you completely vulnerable to another." That was the sentence I had been waiting 10 years to hear. Not an excuse. Not I was only trying to help. Just the clean, unvarnished truth. I walked over to the sink and put my hand on her shoulder. "And I made you carry the terror alone," I told her, because I was too proud to admit that I was getting old. Neither apology erased the forged initials. Neither apology erased the 4 days I had lost to fear. That was not the point. The point was that we had stopped pretending that control was the same thing as love. The blue accordion folder still sits in my oak desk drawer. Inside it are my marriage certificate, my house deed, and that crumpled, voided Oak Ridge application. On the front cover of the folder, written in black permanent ink, is a single sentence. Help is not ownership. I still have bad days. My hands still shake sometimes when I open a jar. There are mornings when my knees ache so badly that I have to use a cane to walk to the mailbox. Whenever the old shame creeps up my spine, I take a breath and say the hardest words an independent mother can ever learn. I need a hand. Stay with me while I figure this out. Those words have kept me in my home. Because real dignity is not pretending you never fall. Real dignity is knowing that when you reach out for help, you never have to surrender the right to your own life. If an adult child genuinely believes an elderly parent is unsafe, should that child be allowed to make life-altering decisions without the parent's consent? Or is overriding their voice simply another form of harm? And if you have ever been told that needing help means losing your right to choose, what did you wish someone had said to you? Here at Broken Bonds, we believe dignity does not disappear because a person needs help. Sometimes the strongest boundary is not refusing care. It is choosing the terms under which care is given.